So it's a difference between secrecy and transparency. So the current policy is here in red, ours is in green. And so basically the highlighted section here, it says that basically we'll tell the parents if students explicitly wish. So if a student, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, whatever age, says don't tell my parents, that's it. The parents are not going to be told. And let's see here, we're saying the opposite. Obviously the parents shall be informed when they become aware, when the teacher or staff becomes aware that a child has these concerns. We're going to tell the parents. We think that's fair because they're not the state's kids, they're the parents' kids, right? They're not the government's kids. So we think parents should be involved. All right, go to the next one. So FCPS recognizes the right of every student to be referred by the preferred name and pronoun. Okay, so that's seeing it solely through a civil rights lens, solely through that, and ignoring the psychological effects that Dr. Communin talked about. So this is actually called affirmative therapy. It's a controversial approach. It's about 10 years old. It doesn't have a lot of evidence. Regular psychology has over 100 years of evidence, and it's not a neutral act. It actually changes the likelihood the student will persist in a transgender identity. So that's the best evidence we have at this point. So we say that parents get to choose. They get to determine what the school will do in terms of addressing the child's needs. All right, we can go to the next one. If I'm going too fast, let me know. There's a lot of language to read here. And then, so for sports, so it's unsafe and unfair versus safe and fair, right? So the idea is we're not even requiring the gender identity of students to be disclosed. In other words, what that means is that if a boy is in a competition, even with another school, potentially a big person that could, with their larger bone mass, etc., we're not letting the other team know about any of that. So there's obviously a safety concern there. We think it's important for girls to be able to compete safely and fairly, and it's demoralizing to go against a biological male who has natural testosterone at many times the rate that a female student would. So we do say, though, if the state of Maryland decides that they're going to mandate this, we do have multiple sections in the policy where we address the fact that this policy could be overruled by state law. So if that happens, a full risk and impact assessment has to be provided and documented and provided to the parents. Right? So at the very least, even if the state's requiring it, let's at least make parents informed. Let's tell them, hey, you're playing a team and there's a boy in that team, biological male, can't tell you which one, but you decide. Do you want your female child to compete in that competition? All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so this is actually maybe the most important slide in the language, which is the very definition of gender identity. And again, Frederick County Public Schools never use the term gender dysphoria, which is the scientific term. Right? The gender identity, again, we've talked about it, is more of a theoretical concept. Now, it's not theoretical in terms of people's experience. That's not what we're saying. I've heard people say that from the other side. They say, oh, you're denying that we exist. No, no, no. We're just saying it's a theory trying to explain the phenomenon of gender dysphoria, and it doesn't have empirical evidence. All right, so they said at Frederick County Public Schools that gender identity is an innate and largely inflexible part of a person's identity. But it's not. We're looking at 70%, and this is a conservative number we're citing in the 70%. Young children who experience gender dysphoria often become comfortable in their natal sex upon completing puberty. So it's the exact opposite. In most cases, if this definition were accurate, we'd be saying, in most cases, this goes away without any intervention at all. That's what the science actually says. But we're saying, oh, if a child says this is what they are because they know their authentic self. And we know that's not true. And so this is actually probably the largest problem in the whole policy, that the very definition of the thing being discussed is wrong. If we could get this right, scientifically accurate, and say, actually, we could call gender dysphoria, it usually exists, that would change the entire policy. Because if you have an accurate definition of the thing that you're writing a policy about, then everything else would flow from that. So this is really the key slide for me in the whole thing, which is saying it's a theoretical concept. It's believed it's less established in younger children and typically becomes stable after a child undergoes puberty. That's the accurate definition, and that's what you should be basing the policy on. All right, and we also acknowledge that some people, I would argue most people, don't have an internal sense of gender identity in the sense that's usually discussed and don't ascribe to this notion. All right, next one. All right, so from this, I think I rushed through that pretty well. Trying to get you guys out of here before too late. Question and answer, and Jim's going to moderate. So if it's medical, it'll be Dr. Gooden. If it's policy, it'll be me. So that's how we'll divide it up.
Okay,